Welcome back to Sandy Bottom Homestead, ladies and gentlemen. It is a fantastic day in coastal North Carolina, and that is very important for today's conversation because we are going to talk about sweet potatoes. I've gotten so many comments and questions and seen them on all of our platforms between the podcast, YouTube, and our Facebook group. We've gotten a lot of questions and I've seen it about sweet potatoes, so I'm going to knock them all out for you today and try and get this kind of covered because sweet potatoes can be very confusing and very misleading, and I don't want that to happen to you. Sweet potato bed in question. We have about, I'd say roughly 2 to 3 weeks probably before we really consider harvesting it. And we're not going to let it go too much longer than that. Maybe, no, I'm not even going to say a month. I'm going to say maybe 3 weeks from today's date. And you can see everything's going good. We've even got some flowers. Isn't that a pretty flower? Look at that. Just beautiful. But this is the question that we have here. A lot of the questions revolve around a number of things, and one of them mostly is, you know, when do you harvest sweet potatoes? It is that time of year, in fact. We are in sweet potato harvesting season. Now, we've talked about a lot of things on this channel and the podcast as well. If you follow that, which is the Backyard Gardens podcast, check it out. But the question that comes up most is, you know, why won't I let my potatoes grow past 100 days before I harvest them? And that's a really important question. There's a lot to that question, but I'm prepared to answer that. Just did an episode on our podcast about days to harvest and, you know, how we feel about that. And each one of these plants in here all have a different days to harvest, right? But the thought process behind harvesting sweet potatoes is, you know, if you let them stay in the ground longer, they're gonna grow and you'll get more and more sweet potatoes. Now, while you may be kind of correct, then let me go ahead and say this right off the bat. This is based off of my experience and my experience alone. If you do not like that, then I'm sorry for you. This video is not for you. But I've been growing sweet potatoes for many years, and it's one of my favorite crops to grow. It's just hands off. You know, I put it in the ground, I let it grow, I fertilize it maybe twice. I don't really even water it much, and I harvest and I enjoy. And our sweet potato harvest from last year, I'll link to the video at the end of this one. We ate off of those for exactly 11 months. So we ate sweet potatoes every week for 11 months, and we called it good. So we know a little bit about growing sweet potatoes, but the thing is, if you let them grow too long, there's a couple things that'll happen. One, they get almost too big. You know, I've kind of coined the term, and I like the term, date night potatoes and family night potatoes, and those are just your bigger size. And I do enjoy getting those, but we also enjoy getting the smaller sweet potatoes. And that's really important because if you let them get too big, I don't want to say they start to get mealy, but they have problems, you know, when you cook them, staying moist. And plus you got to cook them like a hell of a lot longer. So we generally I cook all my sweet potatoes at 425 for an hour. You know, I'll pop them in the toaster oven, I'll walk out, and when it goes off, we got sweet potatoes. So that's just basically how we cook all of our sweet potatoes. I really enjoy a sweet potato. But leaving them in the ground longer than the 100 days, and we need to think that 100 days isn't like it has to be 100 days. It can be 110, it can be 95, it can be 115. It doesn't really matter. But, you know, my growing season is 228 days, I believe, and growing season is frost-free days. That's a lot of time. That's 2 rounds of sweet potatoes if I really wanted to try and push it. One, this sweet potato patch, the key behind sweet potatoes is do not trim them. Do not trim them. Do not trim them. I told you 3 times now. So do not trim them because it lets all of the nutrients go and it grows sweet potatoes. So they grow out, they grow crazy, they take over, they get out. I can't cut my weeds in the front. I expect that every year. And I know it's going to happen. And quite quite honestly, I don't care. But if you want to know when to harvest your sweet potatoes, you simply come in. Let's say you forgot the date that you planted them. You find the base of a plant. We'll come in here, and you're not really going to see a sweet potato necessarily, but what you'll see is you'll see mounding, right? So there's a sweet potato right here. There's a sweet potato right here as well. So I know at this point I have a sweet potato. The key is don't get greedy, okay? You get greedy, you mess it up, and then you really get nothing that you really and truly enjoy. There's a reason why people in the South will harvest at 100 days, because we can go longer, but that's just kind of how we do it. There's multiple reasons. So one reason is it gives us time to get into the ground and get something else in the ground in that bed for fall. So at 100 days, let's say I pull them out in 2 weeks. Let's even just go crazy and say 3 weeks. That's going to be the middle of September. And then our frost date is not for another 9 weeks after that, I think. Is that right? That's seven weeks. So in 7 weeks, we can get, I feel like I'm talking about a baby, or pregnancy, but I'm not, I promise. We can get a round of crops in there, get them situated, get them comfortable so they can cruise through our first frost, and we can get another harvest of some kind. Now this takes planning and this takes purpose, but getting greedy is a really big issue, and it's really common amongst all gardeners because you kind of let that bed sit for so long. And if you don't really know about fall gardening, it can really be an issue to pull it and then have this, like, what seems to be a small window of time open up where there's nothing in it. But in fact, you have a lot of time to get stuff going back in here. So that's really the first reason, or the second reason why we do it. So one is so we get the best quality sweet potatoes. Two is because we want to get something else into the ground. So that'll help us right off the bat. Another issue is we coincide our sweet potato harvest with the peak of hurricane season. Meaning, you know, we just went through a storm. We just had 12 inches of rain, I believe, was the official total. So it got a lot of rain. So we haven't watered this patch in a week. That being said, this sweet potato patch, if we don't have any cracking now, which we don't know, but I'm feeling pretty confident we don't, just based on what we've done in the past. If we went through another storm like that, we would absolutely lose our harvest. So it coincides with that as well. So we can remove all of that. So let's say within the next 3 weeks, we've got a storm coming at us. The day before I'm harvesting the sweet potatoes, and I'm not lying, the day before the storm would hit, I will be out here and I will harvest every single one of those sweet potatoes because I don't want them to crack. So that's the third reason. And then something to be aware of. So there's a lot of people spread out all across the country. You got the south, you got the north, you got the hot, you got the cool, and all that. And then all these people are watching people on YouTube. And what you're doing is you're watching people in individual areas telling you, this is how you do it, no matter what. And that is absolutely not the case. If you live in Florida, you can't do what somebody in Wisconsin's doing, and vice versa. That being said, you can listen to what they're saying and then kind of take advice here and there. But look, we've all got a hard cutoff date for our crops, and that is your first frost date. And I hate to break it to you, but sweet potatoes are a southern crop. End of story. There are varieties that grow faster. So you know, if you live way up north, you're gonna have to plant them earlier and then harvest them later. But for us down here, these grow absolutely natural. They love it, they love the heat, they love the dryness. As a matter of fact, if you water them too much, they get dry. The meat of the potato actually gets dry, so it's just not that good. If you live somewhere farther north, you may in fact need to grow these sweet potatoes long enough to go all the way to the first frost. That is a fact. And then the other thing is when you go to plant them, you can't really plant them when it's cool outside. They really need to be a lot warmer. And so like I wait probably longer. Actually, I know I wait a little bit longer than most people in my area, but I get good results. So that's why I kind of operate the way I do. But you know, our last frost date is, they say April 1st, and we can go 3 weeks without a frost before that last frost comes in. It always happens in April, every single year. If you're from coastal North Carolina, you know, you've lost stuff before. So that being said, if you live way up north, you may not be planting your sweet potatoes until June. So if you do the math, June, July, August, middle of September. Can I get my pinky in half? So that's 100 days. So you see, and then your first frost date may very well be in October. As we speak, you may be feeling the temperatures and seeing the effects of fall as we speak in some areas, and that's okay. But remember, we don't want to be greedy when it comes to these crops, especially root crops, because we don't know what's going in the ground. As far as I know, nobody's marketed X-ray gardening glasses to me yet. And if they have, I would laugh in their face. But we don't know what's going on in the ground. So all we know is the timeline in which we planted them. And if we know that they can get too big, they can start to outgrow. And the other thing is, like, the fire ants will start feeding more, pests will start feeding more, getting ready for winter, the ones that are going to overwinter here. They'll start eating holes in the sweet potatoes as well, so we want to avoid that as well. So all of these things, all of these factors are what drives us to harvest our sweet potatoes at a certain time. So we pretty much stand by the 100-ish days to harvest on our sweet potatoes. It does not necessarily mean all of it, but most of it goes. Now, the other question very quickly is, do you harvest them all at once or do you harvest a few at a time? So in the very nature of a sweet potato, I don't think I need to say this out loud to you. It's a vine. It grows whatever, does whatever the hell it wants. And what it does is it grows along the ground, and then it'll shoot roots down along the vine. And then you'll get sweet potatoes along those roots. And the nature of harvesting them, you've got to dig deep and pull them out. So you harvest all of your sweet potatoes at once, every single one of them. We'll come out here one day, this bed will look like this, and in 2 hours, this bed will look like that one over there, empty. That's what we need to remember. There's no point in leaving a vine or two in the ground to get an extra. I mean, how much of a extra sweet potato are you gonna get? How much more at risk are you gonna leave it? Because you have to remember, if you leave those sweet potatoes in the ground like they are now, they're all using the nutrients, they're all using the water. If you leave just a few in there, then the ground can get saturated and you can ruin. So you ruin what you have left. So in theory, what you've got is a sweet potato patch that has started good, and then you got a good harvest, but you want to let a couple more go, and then really you don't get anything else after that. And that's not what we want. So get them all at once, get them while they're good, get them out, cure them right, and then move them on. I think I've got a sweet potato playlist below. Check that out. It's got all of my sweet potato videos on there. The reason why I don't talk about them a lot is because they're really hands-off. This sweet potato bed grows itself. I'm not lying. It grows itself. It does what it wants to do, and I just let it happen. And that's how we get good sweet potato harvest most years. We have had years where we've messed up and not gotten good ones, but most years, and it looks like this is gonna be a pretty good one as well. We planted more sweet potatoes in this bed than we have in the past. We had some attrition rate, and that's okay. So we'll see what comes out of it, but I'm pretty excited. It's almost sweet potato time. It's my favorite time of year. It is time to see what my hands-off gardening method has produced and enjoy it for the next 11 months.